I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, coming up on Football Today.
He can scarcely believe it himself. Marco Rosa's Monchengladbach are at the very top of the Bundesliga pile.
Let's see what they can conjure this time. And Embolo, very unselfish, allows Hermann to score.
My concept of football is anchored in emotion, hunger and proactivity. Win possession high up the park, get the shortest route to goal. It's a great plan if you can execute it.
And this season, Borussia Monchengladbach have executed their plans to perfection nearly every match. The club lead Bundesliga and host Bayern Munich on Saturday with the chance to go 7 points clear of their rivals. Today we ask, why is Marco Rose one of the hottest coaching prospects in all of Europe? Borussia Monchengladbach sit in first place in the table under Marco Rose, and it's December. Could you have seen this coming in the summer?
No, I did not see that coming. Not at all. I don't. And I think anyone who says they saw it coming is probably lying.
Manuel Veth covers German football for Forbes and ProSoccerUSA.
We all expected them to do very well under Marco Rose because he was such a hot prospect going into the season. You know, I spoke to a Bundesliga executive just a couple of weeks ago, and he said to me, everyone in Germany wanted Marco Rose. Like there was 5-6 different clubs that were very, very interested and were in talks with him. And Borussia Mönchengladbach got him very, very early on. And there's a good why they basically parted ways with Dieter Hecking and went for him, because he's an excellent coach.
What makes him so special?
Those who know me, I split my time pretty evenly between Canada and Germany. And my base in Germany is Munich. And it's not far from Munich to Salzburg, where he coached Red Bull or Europe FC Salzburg, right? And I think it's, in terms of what makes him special, we all see the playing philosophy on the field, right? It's very typical Red Bull football. A lot of teams are going for that. And I think he really has taken that approach almost to the closest ideal that Red Bull football is supposed to be, as laid out by Ralf Rangnick, right? This really high press, the ability to be flexible in attack, a solid defense, quick, fast attacking moves, developing their own players. And he's done that to the highest level in Austria. And we sort of look at the national titles that he won there, but it's also the fact that they had 2 very good runs in the Europa League, which is very difficult for a smaller team from Austria, right? And laid the foundation for a team that could on Tuesday knock out Liverpool in the Champions League, right? So that is the results that make him special. He's just very good at his job. And I think there's also a very strong human element to it, that players really like to play for him. I mean, the fact that he comes from that Mainz background, you know, playing for Jurgen Klopp, there is some elements of that with him as well, you know, that the fact that he is someone who can capture the players in the dressing room. We call that Menschenfänger in German. There's elements of that in many coaches, and he certainly has that.
You mentioned his personality. Is there anything else to his character that makes him stand out a bit?
He's just a very likable person. There was recently an interview he did at ZDF in the Aktuelle Sportstudio, and they were talking about the time at Mainz where him and Sandro Schwarz, they played together at Mainz under Jurgen Klopp. And I think it was the promotion party where they all got very drunk, and Klopp told them that they would both turn out to be coaches. He was right, of course.
Ich habe ihm 2004 auf dieser Aufstiegsfeier, ihm und Sandro Schwarz gesagt, waren wir alle drei nicht mehr fahrtüchtig.
And then his reaction was, of course, that he remembers, and that, yes, they were very drunk. And, just the fact that he's very quick on his feet. He's not quite, I think, as jovial as Jurgen Klopp. That loud laugh, that really friendly hug mentality. I don't think you see that quite as much with him, but you definitely see an attitude that you see him on TV, you see him in interviews, you speak to him in interviews, you want to like him, right? And I think that helps players, that if they have someone who's likable, that makes it much easier and approachable for them.
He's got that charisma, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a very charismatic guy. I've seen even a statement somewhere that can't remember who said it, but he's one of the most attractive coaches in European football. I mean, I'm not the one to judge that, but I think there is certainly that.
Let's take a step back and kind of talk about what shaped that personality. He grew up in Leipzig in East Germany back when there were two Germanys. How did that mold him and mold his character?
During the time of the GDR, it was the beginning of the demonstrations that saw the end of the regime. You know, unlike Dresden, the other big East German city, Leipzig had access to West German television. We always, and this will sound really... So if you're listening to this and you're from Dresden, I'm sorry, but we always call Dresden, the people that live in Dresden, they're from the Valley of the Dumb, because in Dresden you couldn't get radio and television signals from the West. So they weren't as aware and linked into what was going on. And I mean, I'm not sure how exactly it was like at the time of East Germany, but I mean, it is where the demonstration started, where, you know, the movement to really bring down the regime. And I'm pretty sure that will have a big impact on you if you're a kid growing up there or a young person playing there.
So anytime you have a discussion about Marco Rose, you can't ignore Jurgen Klopp. And I think we got to mention Klopp within a couple minutes. So how did he meet Jurgen Klopp for the first time?
Oh, well, he played for him at Mainz. That club, Mainz, is such an interesting place when it comes to developing coaches. When you just look at the recent years of the different coaches that have come from there, we all look at Jürgen Klopp, but then there's Thomas Tuchel, Sandro Schwarz. Yeah, of course he was fired recently, but as a young coach had some decent success. We had Martin Schmidt, who's now coaching at Augsburg. And then, of course, Marco Rose. And now I don't want to say Marco Rose played for Jurgen Klopp and then all of a sudden, you know, became this world star head coach. I don't think the world quite works that way. I think that you get influenced by other people around you, but there has to be a predisposition, a talent for you to be able to do that. So I think we draw those conclusions very quickly that, oh yeah, he's played for Klopp and therefore he becomes this head coach. I think there is certainly things that he's learned from him, but I wouldn't never say he's a Jurgen Klopp copy.
How is their football philosophy or the way they go about it different?
I think that he is very, very influenced by the way Red Bull play. And I think there's a lot of Ralf Rangnick in Marco Rose.
Rangnick is one of the most influential German coaches of the Bundesliga era.
What I find fascinating, for example, a lot of the Leipzig style always has been that 4-2-2-2 with the two attackers, the two attacking midfielders that play like playmakers, and then two holding midfielders, of which one can be a transition midfielder. He kind of changed that to having a 4-3-1-2, right? And you still see elements of that at Gladbach.
So let's get back to Marco Rose, the player, because that's when he met Klopp. Did he have a remarkable career? What type of player did he end up being?
You know, I'll be quite frank with you. Marco Rose did not leave much of an impression of me. He really just popped up as a head coach, and I'm like, oh yeah, he used to play for Mainz, right? So I think that really much sums up his career. Played for Mainz. I mean, he played in the Bundesliga for Mainz. That's pretty good. You know, I definitely think his coaching career is already off to a better start than his playing career ever was, right? And I think that is actually an interesting aspect. Maybe that's the biggest parallel between Klopp and Rose, that they both were pretty unimpressive defenders playing for Mainz.
So where did his managerial career start?
It's, the most random place ever at Lokomotiv Leipzig, coaching at the lower echelons of German football. I think there's a statement somewhere that he said, like, at one point he had to deal with like the water not working in the dressing rooms and, you know, having to phone the manager to get the electricity bills paid, and then still like coaching all these players that also had day jobs. I think it was a very rough start to a career, but probably also a very interesting start to a career because it teaches you both man management, but also just simple organization skills. And I think that's something that's lost. Kind of reminds me, you know, when you watch documentaries about the early years of football, where the manager literally was a manager, right? It wasn't just about getting the best 11 players on the pitch, but they had to do everything, including massaging the players, right? So I think it was almost like that for him. And I think it was a very, very basic job. And it teaches you a lot of things to having to deal with working with the base, very minimum, but still getting the maximum results.
So if Lokomotiv Leipzig was his undergraduate degree, if you will, RB Salzburg was where he got his master's and doctorate. He was there for 6 seasons, and he was coaching the youth teams and then the senior team. What did he accomplish with RB Salzburg?
A lot. He won the title there twice. Won the ÖFB-Pokal, so the equivalent of the German DFB-Pokal there. What stands out to me the most was the run that they had in that Europa League. Let me get my years right, 2017, 2018, right?
Red Bull Salzburg trailed Lazio 4-2 from the first leg, but they stunned the Italian giants, winning 4-1 thanks to 3 second-half goals in 4 minutes. 6-5 it finished.
When they were knocked out controversially by Olympique Marseille, qualified them for the Champions League for the first time that they qualified for the Champions League, and they're now having a very successful run in that Champions League group stage. You know, as I said, they could potentially knock out Liverpool on Tuesday. They need to beat Liverpool, and then they're through and Liverpool are out. And that is not super unlikely. That's because of the team that he built there. And I think it's quite a lot that he achieved there. We measure people by titles, but we should also measure them by what they left behind. And Jesse Marsch, as successful as a coach he is, and I rate Jesse Marsch, his successor at RB Salzburg, very highly. He walked into a functioning club. And that's, I think, something that we probably have to give Rose the most credit for.
Can you talk about what he learned from that experience at Salzburg? I know he's talked about it in the past.
It's a fundamental thing, right? Going from a club like Lokomotiv Leipzig, you know, the lower echelons, and then going to Red Bull, where there is a very stringent playing philosophy, all laid out by the mastermind Ralf Rangnick, right? I love the fact that you had that allusion to university earlier, Joshua, because it is kind of like that at Leipzig. It's like a school, and you see the amount of coaches that have graduated from that school and have done very well, especially in the Bundesliga. I think what you learn there is to get the maximum out of the player personnel that you have at your hand, playing the most efficient attacking style football possible. I think that is the lesson that you see that all those coaches have taken away from being part of the Red Bull Academy. Hey, let's call it that. That song has a nice ring to it. Because I look at some of the examples that we have in Germany alone, right? There's also Adi Hütter, who has done quite well, and his style is very aggressive football, and he's won 2 titles of Red Bull Salzburg as well. Of course, there's Marco Rose. I think that there is something to that. Niko Kovac, who I still really highly rate as well, also graduated from that school of thought, and his style didn't ultimately not work at Bayern, but I'm pretty sure he'll pop up at a Bundesliga side soon and it will work very well there. I think that is really the things that he took away from there, a clear football philosophy and getting the maximum out of the players that you have and giving those players the tools necessary to succeed.
So after he wins the title in Austria with Salzburg, he knows that he wants to move on into bigger and better opportunities, specifically in Germany. What does he decide next?
He goes to Gladbach. There was many teams that were interested. I think Hertha had talked to him. Schalke had talked to him. You know, then there's a couple of teams that I don't really necessarily want to name here because it's not necessarily public knowledge that were also interested in him. And he chooses Gladbach. You know, the reason I think he chose Gladbach is because they were very fast. They were quick. And because I think the deal was done around January, right? So they were just very fast getting the job done. I mean, it was a big risk for them because they already had a head coach. They basically had to part ways with Dieter Hecking to get their man. It was an interesting step for him because, you know, a lot of people suspected he could have gone maybe to a bigger club even. But I think it shows a lot about his personality that he's not chosen an impossible challenge in a big club. That he said, okay, well, Gladbach is a club on the cusp. It's a team that is in the Europa League or could compete for the Europa League already. At that point, he was probably already aware that they're going to get some money from selling Torgen Hazard to Borussia Dortmund. And there was a clear, in Max Eberl, there is a very, very good sporting director with very good contacts already in place that could get him the players that he wanted to build something. And I think that was what made the place attractive for him. You know, the ability to create something on a very good foundation without the spotlight of being at a big club.
So he gets to Borussia Monchengladbach, and they were already a Europa League team. How does he transform the team when he comes in the summer?
Well, the question is, did he transform it, or did he sit down with Max Eberl and did the two of them do it together, right? I mean, a big important point in German football is always that the head coach coaches and the sporting director signs the players. I think that Max Eberl and Marco Rose sat down and said, okay, these are the players that we need. And I mean, there was a couple signings in there that Breel Mbolo, for example, where everyone said, well, this guy has an injury history at Schalke that is very, very long. He once cost 26 million euros and never really accomplished the things that everyone expected him to accomplish. And they paid 10 million euros for him, and he's doing very well now. Then there was Marcus Thuram. And I know Marcus Thuram, Milan wanted to sign him, or let me rephrase that, the analytics team at Milan wanted to sign him because they said, okay, this is a perfect player. He fits our style of play. This kid is going to go and become a superstar. Right, but then you have to think about this. This is a crazy thing. Milan were not willing to spend the 9 million euros to get him, and Gladbach said 9 million euros. That's a present. We'll take that.
The 22-year-old is the league's most prolific new signing, playing a crucial part in Mönchengladbach's run to the top.
Here is Thuram. Neatly done by Marcus Thuram. Oh, brilliantly done!
Sometimes you also need to be lucky that another club doesn't go for it, but I think also Max Eberl is a very good sporting director and can find those deals. So he got him the players that he needed. And I think that is, especially in the light that they lost Torgan Hazard, is quite an achievement.
So they sit in first place in the league. They have a bunch of nice young talent on the team. But for those people who haven't been watching them this year, why are they so successful and winning so many games?
Yeah, they play a very pressing game, and they go into a lot of challenges, and that's something that you see with, I'm using this word a lot today, but that's a typical Red Bull thing.
Compared to last season, the Foals are sprinting more, tackling more, and creating far more clear-cut chances.
But there's also an aspect that they are just very good at winning their challenges.
High pressing from Gladbach, and it might pay dividends. It does for Embolo. Freiburg simply couldn't deal with that high press.
They win 106 challenges per match on average. They're in the top 5 when it comes to yellow cards. That is aspects that you don't see, but that are very important when it comes to winning games. You have to have a workman-like mentality.
If Borussia put in a big performance and get a win against Bayern on Saturday, could that put Rosa in pole position to get the Bayern Munich job?
No. No, I just can't see that. I think that the next Bayern Munich coach is going to be a coach that will not play that style of football. Bayern play like Barcelona or Real, or their nobility in European football, and they behave as such. And I say that with all the upper nosiness that you can possibly put into this. They need coaches like Pep Guardiola and Jupp Heynckes or Erik ten Hag, right? The counter-pressing, aggressive football style will never work with that squad. I personally don't think it's possible there. It just doesn't work with the philosophy of the club. And I think they've now learned that lesson.
So where does he rank amongst young coaches within Europe?
I still think that Julian Nagelsmann is the hottest prospect in European football. We were talking about a head coach who's only 32 and could potentially win the German championship with Leipzig this year, right? Because I do still think that Leipzig have the deeper squad than Gladbach. So I think he ranks very highly, but I think with Nagelsmann there is someone in the Bundesliga who's ranked even higher than that. I think that is just fine. He sees it that way probably as well.
So what are the odds that they win the title?
I've been asked that many times this week, and I think a lot of it will depend on how the game on Saturday will go. If they win that game, it's 7 points to Bayern. And yes, it probably still will be only 1 point to Leipzig. But that point gap to Bayern is always the one that you want to look out for when you want to win the title. Because you know if you leave Bayern behind, your chances of being first are very high in this league. And I think that is really where we're going to see whether this Borussia Monchengladbach side is for real or not. They beat Bayern. We have a story where we potentially could see a title race that might not even involve Bayern, because it might be between them and Leipzig, which would be fascinating in itself. But I think it all will depend on how the Klassiker, and I'm using the term Klassiker for this one because this Gladbach-Bayern clash used to be the Klassiker in the 70s, right? How the Klassiker will end on Saturday. And I think that is how maybe also where we're going to find out how the story of Marco Rose continues.
Manuel Veth is a freelance journalist whose work on the Bundesliga can be found on Forbes, ProSoccerUSA, and the Futbolgrad Network.
The show is produced by John McKenzie. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and this was Football Today. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and share it with a friend. See you next time.